Now, Raffaele Mc Creadie is the managing director at an agency called Decimal and has some thoughts on how great clients, great relationships are often distanced by paperwork. It's an interesting conundrum that we're going to explore. You go on to say it's paramount to become a partner to your client and not a supplier in spite of agency size. But that's fairly obvious, but I think people do fall into that supplier relationship, don't they?
Very much so. I think it's absolutely paramount to become a partner to your customers. More so because if you become a partner, you become entrenched in their business. The title of great partnerships and great clients divided or separated by paperwork is actually born from a good place, particularly from small agencies, because they go beyond the call of duty to try and impress customers without necessarily pragmatically following the paperwork or the procedures that follow, for argument's sake.
So what are you saying? They do too much, in other words?
Well,
they bend over too easily?
Correct.
Yeah.
They almost scurry to the forte because they'd like to go beyond the call of duty, which is a great thing. But, you know, in particular for a small agency that started out, the simple steps of acquiring a proper brief to a cost estimate to a purchase order is very, very important because it influences the cash flow down the line. You don't want to be sort of in the 25th of the month running around trying to get quotes approved for work that was handed and done in on the 5th. So it's super important that understanding it's born from a good place, not necessarily a bad place. And if you really capitalize on the fact that you become a partner, not necessarily a supplier, that longevity of the business is more guaranteed than next time an account goes out for pitch or tender.
I understand your point, but often the enthusiasm that you're talking about is driven by desperation. And it's difficult sometimes to find a balance between the two. That small agency is desperate for the business, so they will over-amplify, they will overcompensate.
Of course. 9 times out of 10, I feel if you communicate to the client in the beginning, they will understand. And that one opportunity or chance where they potentially don't necessarily want to do business with those brands. But you're absolutely correct. You know, people will amplify their intent, and people will really try as hard as they can. And like you said, a young age will kind of bend over backwards to impress, which is a good thing. But I guess it's all based on the premise of service. And if you're there all the time and you're servicing your customer, those things should naturally shine through. Considering that most agencies don't try to look at one-hit wonder work. We should be looking at it sort of building a relationship and investing in a relationship instead of just investing in the sale per se, sort of a flash in the pan job.
So what are you also suggesting, that you've got to get the process in place before you chase the business?
Correct. And the best time to have the conversation is right in the beginning of the relationship, not at the end. It's super important to start strong in order for the relationship to remain strong.
And I'm assuming, Raffaele, that clients themselves will appreciate the honesty about process up front, won't they? The last thing you want to do is to be 3/4 into a project and then to be ambushed by something that you were completely unaware of, because Correct. As a smaller agency, you were simply too afraid to ask.
Correct. 100%. You're 100% correct. And I think it's also a case of them respecting it, because they also have process and flows within their business. But as I conceded, the best time to have a conversation is in the beginning.
Let's assume that you get to a point where you've got to start talking about process and you haven't done so. It's a reality. It happens. Where's a good starting point then? How do you start locking in those processes? How do you prioritize what they are?
Firstly, I think it's a case of being consistently consistent. We must be consistent and very, very disciplined in the workflow and the procedures. A lot of people recognize that as an admin-based thing, and not many people are too inspired by doing admin. We want to get to creative work and develop award-winning ideas. But a really, really great place is to understand that potentially there's only some things that you can learn within the storm. And I think if you get burnt by this, or you find yourself having an uncomfortable conversation with a client because you've presented a piece of work now, they've received a quote, never mind you converting it to an invoice, and it seems a bit too expensive for their budget or the money that they allocated, you start poisoning the well a little bit. It's a very, very difficult thing to claw back from.
Just a final question. I need a quick answer from you. All of this is then also overlaid into the Black economic empowerment relationship as well. It would be your contention that while agencies benefit from correct BEE and procurement, you've got to be aware of sweat equity. You've also got to be hyper aware of not being pressured into the deal itself.
Correct. So firstly, BEE is a wonderful thing, and it's super important for our nation and South Africa.
It's not only a wonderful thing, it's a necessary thing now in terms of the new codes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's something that must be altruistically embraced. But I have 3 hard and fast tips for those who are engaged in a BE transaction now or potentially considering one. I think the first one is don't be blinded by the lights and potentially understand that sometimes the best deals in life are the ones that you walk away from. The second thing is never devalue yourself or your company based on the offer of sweat equity. Your potential new partners and your potential investors must see the value within you, not only the potential prospect of success. And the last one is to be 100% truthful. You know, as I conceded earlier, if you start strong, you work strong and you finish strong. And I think that should be a nice guise for those who are maybe a little bit confused or maybe those who are yet to experience, in particular the agency now that sort of get into that 8, 9, 10 million rand sort of turnover mark that needs now the correct governance to weaponize their business in the right way. I think those 3 kind of hard, fast tips should help.
And that certainly is useful. Raffaele Mc Creadie from Decimal. Thank you very much for joining us on the
Thanks for having me.